All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to MOS Live. My name is Becca, my pronouns are she and her, and you're here for our Live Animals, Desert Animals edition. Now, if you have any questions during the webinar and you're joining us on Zoom, you can type your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. If you're joining us on Zoom and would like closed captions, you are welcome to click on the closed caption button and click show subtitles. And if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, thank you very, very much for being here. Unfortunately, we cannot see your comments at this time. All right, so with that, I think it is just about time to have our educators and our first animal get up on screen, and I'm going to mute myself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Corey, and I'm the invertebrate keeper here at the Museum of Science. And with me today is Liz, who is our Live Animal Center assistant curator. So the first animal that we are going to talk about with deserts is actually one that is native to the United States. So this is a desert hairy scorpion, and it's actually really fun because she's kind of putting on a little show for you guys. Normally, desert hairy scorpions, like most scorpions, are nocturnal. So that means that they sleep during the day and are awake at night. So it's actually really cool that she's walking around right now. We were expecting to show you guys a sleeping scorpion. So some things you may notice about her coloring, her tail, and her legs. So being a scorpion, she is the type of arachnid. So she has 8 legs. And what makes scorpions also unique is that nice tail that they have. And that's what they use to protect themselves because they are venomous. So they can sting with that. Now, her coloring is really helpful for her because as a desert animal, she needs to be able to blend in with her surroundings. So that way, if she was black or pink or yellow, she would really stand out and be easy for predators to find. Because not only is she a carnivore and a predator, she's also prey for other animals. So scorpions live, or desert hairy scorpions, these are actually a shorter lived species than other types of scorpions. These guys live up to be about 5 to 10 years in the wild, but in captivity, they can actually live to be about 20 years old, which is pretty crazy to think that this scorpion may be a lot older than most of the people watching today. So she's actually showing you her nice pincers at the front. So those 2 claws, that's actually what she uses to catch her prey and eat. She's less likely to use her stinger when looking for prey unless it's a lot larger than her. So being a desert animal, she does tend to burrow. So during the day, she'll burrow down or be under logs, rocks, other objects like that, staying out of the sun and out of view of predators. And then during the nighttime, she'll come out and she'll hunt. Now, scorpions are actually less active on a full moon. On full moons, they tend to not come out as much, and that is because of the UV, the ultraviolet light that comes, that's reflected off of our moon, and that actually allows scorpions to glow. Now, we can't see that with our human eyes. We only see visible light, but other animals can see UV light, and they use that to be able to find scorpions. So there's tons of different theories on why scorpions do that, why their exoskeleton has that ability to glow under UV light, but no one really knows for sure. There's lots of really cool theories and studies, but nobody knows for sure. So it looks like there might be a couple questions. So I'll turn it over and see if we have any.
We certainly have a lot of great questions coming in, and I think we might as well start with the one that we always get. Elizabeth, age 8, is wondering, what is her name?
That is such a great question. So this is Lamar. So Lamar was actually named by a visitor who came here to the museum. We had just gotten her and we needed a name. So a visitor walked by and we asked, hey, what should we name the scorpion? And he chose Lamar. And so now his name is Lamar.
Awesome, thank you. And a follow-up question from Elizabeth, age 8, is, does she sting or pinch you?
That's such a great question. So this species of scorpion is a little more docile. So that means that they're more okay being handled or having people come in and out of their enclosure. They're they're more going to run away from you than get defensive. So you can actually see right now that this scorpion, she's not in a defensive position. So a defensive position would be her claws or her pincers would be up. They'd be ready. She'd be standing on all of her legs, and her tail, it's kind of circled around right now. It would be up and in a very stinging position, so she could easily just whip down and sting what's ever near her. So she does have venom, and it is held in her tail, and that's where she does sting from. So she can do that. And if we put her in a position, so for instance, Liz right now is working with the scorpion. If Liz stuck her hand right in front of the scorpion's face right now, the scorpion's in a corner and has nowhere to go. So the scorpion would probably try to sting Liz. But we're putting the scorpion in that position. Otherwise, she would just try to run away and hide under something else. That's a wonderful question.
Awesome. And we have two people, including Zachary, whose birthday is today. So happy birthday, Zachary.
Happy birthday.
They're wondering, how big is this scorpion?
That's a wonderful question. So the length of her body is probably the size of my middle finger here, maybe a little bit smaller. So she's probably about 3 inches long, not including her tail. If we include her tail, she's probably closer to 4 inches, maybe 5. So this is the largest species of scorpion we do have here in the United States. Again, these guys live in the southwest of the United States down into Mexico. So we will not find any scorpions here. It's a little too cold in our climate here in Massachusetts. So most of them are going to be more southern.
Now we have a lot of people, including, I'll name a few, Angela and Hero, also Prisha, and also Katie, all wondering, what does the scorpion eat?
Wonderful, wonderful question. So here at the museum, our scorpions get mealworms, crickets. They kind of get a little bit of a variety. Their favorite is crickets, but we like to give them some variety in their diet. In the wild, scorpions would tend to eat insects, but they can also eat small reptiles, and they could eat small mammals. Now that's going to be not a big part of their diet, but they can eat those animals.
Awesome. And we have a few more questions. A couple of people are wondering, how old is this scorpion?
That's a wonderful question. This scorpion, I believe, so we got this one as an adult, so we're not exactly sure, but I believe this scorpion is about 3 years old.
All right. And then we have a few questions wondering, maybe from Lucy age 10, why does she glow in the dark?
Such a great question. So it's not actually that she's glowing in the dark, but there is, so when we see, you can see my shirt is black, or the wall behind me is purple. And we're able to see those colors because of what's called visible light. And that's how we're able to see these colors. Our scorpion, you can see that she's like a tan, opaque color. And again, that's because the visible light from the sun or from our lights is coming down. It's hitting, and we're going to get to a little light lesson here. It's hitting our clothes, bouncing off, and that's the color we're seeing. So UV light is a special kind of light that our human eyes, we cannot see. So if we had a black light, we could use the black light to see the color that other animals can see when the UV light hits her. So if we turned out all the lights right now, she would not glow in the dark. We would need a special light so our human eyes can see. But some insects and some other animals, they can see. So they can see more of a spectrum than we can. Just how snakes, they see a little bit different too, right? It kind of works like that. So again, if we turned off all the lights, we wouldn't be able to see her. She'd be just like us. She wouldn't be glowing. But if we used a special light called a black light, we would then be able to see her glow. If you want to see an example of this, you can go to Museum of Science at Home and go to our Sparks of Science section, where we look at our Asian forest scorpion, and you can actually see I use a black light to show you our scorpion glowing. So if you want to see an example of that, I would head to our Sparks of Science section on our website.
Awesome. Thank you. Now we have so many amazing questions, but I do know we also have two other animals to get to. So I think it might be time that I share my screen and get to our next animal. So for those of you who potentially missed some fun facts about our scorpion Lamar here, you can take a picture of this slide and hopefully you get to learn a little bit more about this.
I think we are just about ready. So we're going to stay within the US desert, but move on to a reptile, which Corey is about to reveal. Give her just another moment. All right, so the reptile Corey has, most of you probably can identify pretty quickly as a snake, and you would be absolutely correct. Now, this is a snake called a desert rosy boa. Now, a lot of times people are surprised to see such a small snake like this called a boa. Usually people think boa constrictor, it's going to be gigantic. There certainly are some boas that get very large, but not all boas are big. We actually have two species of boa constrictor that are native to the United States. The desert rosy boa is one example. We also have something called a rubber boa native to the US. Now, this snake is pretty much full size. So they typically only get around 2 feet in length. So that is relatively small. Like I said, there certainly are boas that get much larger than that. Now, desert rosy boas, again, live in the pretty harsh climates of the Sonoran and Mojave deserts here in the United States. Now, they have a couple ways that actually help them to survive those hot temperatures in that area. One thing, like our scorpion, these snakes tend to be nocturnal or active mostly at nighttime. So they really just do their best job they can to avoid that hot sun in the middle of the day. So that is one thing they do. Another thing is they often stay hidden from the sun in rocky crevices. So they don't burrow or dig a hole necessarily, but they do kind of find their way between some rocks to kind of protect themselves from that heat. Now, desert rosy boas are carnivores. All snakes are carnivores. All snakes eat other animals. You might be wondering what a tiny snake like this would eat. They do eat mostly small rodents, but they are able to get even small lizards as well. So mostly it's going to be small mammals. Now, desert rosy boas are the ultimate ambush predator. What that means is they are sit and wait predators. Now, believe it or not, I don't want to embarrass this snake too much. Desert rosy boas are the slowest snake in the world. I'm not sure exactly how scientists did that study and figured that out, but they determined that rosy boas at their absolute fastest can only move about 1 mile per hour. So that is pretty slow, especially if we compare that to the fastest snakes in the world, which are the mambas. They can get from 9 to 11 miles per hour. So the rosy boas are extremely slow. They basically sit and wait. Once something is really close to them, a couple inches in front of their face, they do have really good accuracy with their strike going after it. But they do have that record for being the slowest snake in the world. Although I don't know, she seems like she's moving at a decent clip, even just moving around on Corey's hands and arms right now. Now, I'm sure this already opened up lots of questions, so why don't I turn it over to some of those?
Definitely. And we had a couple of people noticing how close she got to the camera, which was pretty adorable, if you ask me. So we have some of our typical questions. Prisha, age 8, is wondering, what is her name and age?
Her age, she is actually 19 years old. So that is definitely getting older for a snake, but it's not uncommon for boas to live 20, 25 years in captivity. So she's still a very healthy snake and hopefully has many more years left in her. And her name is Rosie. We thought it was a pretty cute name, even though they're called a rosy boa, but we still thought it was a pretty cute name.
Awesome. And we have a couple questions regarding their scales. One from Lucy, grade 5, is wondering, why do they have scales? And someone else is asking, do boas shed their skin?
Yeah, so they do have scales covering their entire bodies. You guys are getting a really good glimpse right now at the underbelly or underside scales. Those are a little bit wider than the scales you'll see. Ooh, and now she's showing you a perfect glimpse of the top of her body. So the scales on the tops of their bodies are a little bit smaller. Snakes basically have those scales for protection, helps them from drying out. So they do help cover their bodies, protect them, provide structural support, and really just prevent them from drying out. Going along with that, snakes do shed their skin. A lot of times people know that about snakes, but people often don't think of it for ourselves or for other animals. Pretty much everything has to shed. We shed in such tiny little pieces that we often don't even notice it. Times you might notice that you shed your skin, maybe in the winter when it's really dry, or if you ever get a sunburn. That's when you notice your skin peeling. Snakes are pretty cool though, because when they shed their skin, they wait and do it all at once. So they might only shed a couple times a year, every couple months. And it is pretty dramatic, and the whole piece typically comes off in just one piece.
Awesome. Now we have quite a few questions wondering, what does she eat? But also we had a question a little bit further down from Cedric, age 8, wondering if they eat things whole.
So here at the museum, our desert rosy boas actually eat small mice. We do feed them mice that are already dead. It's more humane. It's also safer. Live prey could always fight back and potentially hurt the snake. So it is safer, and we always feed mice to our snakes that are already dead. And whoever asked if snakes eat things whole, that is exactly right. Snakes do have teeth. They're very pointy, they're very sharp, but they're really only made to grab onto an animal. They're not meant to chew the animal. So a snake uses those teeth to grab a hold of the animal it's going to eat. And then they have a really special jaw that allows them to eat big things. So this snake could eat a good sized mouse, even though if you look at her head, it looks pretty tiny to you. They are able to eat things 2 to 3 times the size of that head. But that's pretty cool that they can eat something whole.
I think so too. And we have a great question about snakes in general from Harrison, age 5, wondering, how do they move? I mean, they don't have legs.
It is pretty amazing. Snakes are very strong, very muscular animals. Different snakes have different types of movements, but they are very muscular animals in general. The way that rosy boas tend to move is called rectilinear motion. I know that's kind of a big word, but basically what they do is they use those really wide belly scales that we're getting a pretty decent glimpse of right now, and they kind of push them against a surface, almost like a tire. So that's the best way that they move. Some snakes do it a little bit differently, have more of a sidewinder pattern, but that's how rosy boas tend to move. But it is pretty amazing if you think of it, that snakes are able to move and be this strong when they don't have legs to support themselves.
All right, and I think we have time for maybe just one more question because we do have one more animal to get to. It's a great question also. Someone noticed that it looks a little bit watery. So why is it a little watery looking?
I'm guessing they probably mean it almost looks wet.
Probably.
Snakes are really, really shiny. You guys are getting a really good view of that right now, but they're actually not wet at all. So notice how dry Corey's hands are. Her hands aren't wet from touching this snake. Snake scales, I know we talked about scales a little while ago, they're actually made of a special protein called keratin. This is the same material that makes up your hair and your fingernails. So just like those two things might be shiny, especially when light is directly hitting it, that is why snakes have that shine. But they're not slimy or wet at all. It is a very common myth about snakes.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for that. Now we unfortunately do have more questions, but we do have one more animal to get to. So I'm going to share my screen one more time so that I can show you all the fun, fast facts of our desert rosy boa, Rosie. Again, feel free to take a picture of this slide so you can learn a little bit more about her as we get ready to bring out our last animal.
We are just about ready. Corey is just fixing the camera, getting that ready.
All right.
Now, is another reptile. And it is another reptile that is kind of in that same area as the first two that we met. So it is a US resident, native to the Sonoran and Mojave deserts. Now, a lot of times people see this animal and think, oh, look at the adorable tortoise. Some people think, look at the adorable turtle. You actually both would be correct. This specific animal is a desert tortoise, but all tortoises are turtles. But to confuse you a little bit more, not all turtles are tortoises. So turtle is kind of the bigger group of those reptiles, and then tortoises are kind of a subgroup under turtle. So tortoise characteristics, things you can look at that typically tell you you're looking at a tortoise. First is a high domed shell. A lot of turtles that spend more time swimming have more smooth, streamlined shells so they can move through the water a little bit faster. Another good clue that you are looking at a tortoise that is designed for land are the legs. Tortoises are known for having elephantine columnar legs. Nice close up on that leg right now. Doesn't it kind of look like an elephant leg? So those are good indicators that you have a tortoise. Often in animals, there are a few exceptions, but those are good things you can look for if you're trying to figure out if something is a tortoise or a turtle. Now, desert tortoises, like I said, are in the southwestern United States in the deserts, and they are herbivores. I know people often wonder what the animals eat. What our desert tortoise is being offered right now is a hibiscus flower. They would eat a lot of grasses, wildflowers in the wild. So we'll see if she gives you guys a bit of a show and takes a bite of that hibiscus while she's out here for the presentation. Maybe not. Now, desert tortoises, kind of like the Rosy boa that we met before, have a lot of good ways that they are able to survive better in the harsh climates of the desert. One of the main things they do is actually spend most of their time underground. I know looking at this tortoise, you might not think she'd be the best digger, but they are actually amazing diggers. Those really strong front legs can kind of burrow down in that dirt, in sand, in the desert. So they actually dig really elaborate burrows, and that's where they spend most of their time. Desert tortoises are known to spend up to 95% of their lifetimes in underground burrows. So that's the main way they escape that really hot desert sun. Another really cool thing that desert tortoises do is they actually have really big bladders. I know that might seem kind of gross. Their bladder can be up to about 40% of their entire body weight. So what that means is a desert tortoise may only get the chance or opportunity to drink once a year when there's heavy rain. What they do when it is that once a year, they drink a lot during that heavy rain, and then it can actually store that water in the bladder and recycle those nutrients throughout their bodies. So it's really cool. They can kind of reuse and recycle that water because, again, they might only have that chance to drink once a year. Here at the museum, our desert tortoise is pretty spoiled, and we give her access to water every day. But in the wild, they definitely would not be that lucky. Now, I'm sure this already brought up lots of questions, so why don't I turn it over to some of those?
Sure. Nick, age 17, is wondering what is his or her name, and also put in a suggestion for Shelly. And I like that as a tortoise name.
I actually do really like that. This one does already have a name, but I'm going to have to write Shelly down that I remember that for future turtles and tortoises that we have. This desert tortoise is named Sonora, which again is indicative of the desert where she comes from, but I think Sonora is a pretty good name for her. And she is now about 24 years old, so she is mature and considered an adult.
Awesome. Thank you. So that was also Harrison, age 5's question. How old is the turtle? So a few people actually are wondering, why is the shell bumpy?
There's not really one specific reason that I know of that would make a desert tortoise have kind of those bumps on the shell. It is indicative of the species, but not all tortoises that live on land have those huge bumps like that. Some of them have kind of the high dome shell, but it's more smooth. So that's a good question. I don't really know exactly why. I know tortoises tend to have similar shells. So if you looked at another desert tortoise, you'd be able to tell that it was a desert tortoise, even though it might look slightly different than from this. That actually kind of makes me think of another thing that people often ask, if you can count the rings on a tortoise or turtle, kind of like you can in a tree. And it actually doesn't really work that way. It does kind of roughly show their growth, but you don't know necessarily how much that the tortoise is growing the same exact amount every year. So you couldn't say, okay, this ring is 1 year. But that's a good question. I don't know that I exactly know why they have those bumps exactly the way they do.
Anna has 2 questions. 1, why are they so slow? And 2, how big are they without their shell?
Ooh, both interesting questions. So tortoises and turtles cannot come out of their shells. It is actually part of their skeleton. So their backbone and ribs are fused to that shell. So a tortoise or turtle couldn't live outside of its shell. So you're pretty much seeing most of the soft bits of the turtle or tortoise when you're seeing the head and legs out of the shell, but they can't come out of the shell anymore than they are right now. I know sometimes you see turtles jump out of their shells on cartoons, but it's definitely not going to happen in real life. That would be like leaving your bones behind for the day. Now, turtles and tortoises are pretty slow for the most part. Some of the swimming aquatic turtles can actually be pretty fast. For tortoises, they don't really have to be fast. If you think about it, they have those nice hard shells as protection. So if Sonora, our desert tortoise, felt kind of scared, she'd pull her back legs completely into her shell, pull her head completely into her shell. Then she'd use those strong front legs to kind of block her face in. So really her softest bits would be protected in that shell. So they don't really have to be fast. Also, you notice what her food is. Her food isn't really very fast moving since she eats mostly plants. So that's another reason she doesn't really need to have to be fast.
All right, and unfortunately, we are just about almost out of time. So I think we'll just have one final question, and it is, what is her lifespan? How old can they live to be?
A lot of tortoises can be pretty long-lived animals. It is not uncommon for a desert tortoise to live 60 to 80 years. There are some other kinds of tortoises that are known to live well over 100 years. So they are definitely pretty long-lived animals.
All right, thank you so much for that. And with that, I think we are just about done. So I'm going to share my screen one more time so we can get some fun facts on Sonora, our desert tortoise. You can, again, take a picture of this slide if you would like to see anything else about her. But at this point, I'm going to ask my Live Animal Center friends to say their goodbyes.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you for joining us today. All right. So with that, it is just about the very, very end of the program. I'm so sorry we had so many unanswered questions. You all had great questions and we just ran out of time to answer them all. But if you would like to see any more of these programs, you can head to mos.org/mosathome to see a full list of our virtual offerings. And if you enjoyed this program and would like to support the museum and MOS at Home, you can head to engage.mos.org/welcome. Once again, I want to thank you all very much for being here today, and we'll see you all next time.